Hey, good morning to you, and welcome to the show. I'm John F. Gately, and today we're going to take a look at Massachusetts headlines. So we have this unbelievable story. Is it unbelievable, or is it just becoming normal? Out of Lynn, ICE. Once again, let's congratulate ICE for arresting a child rapist. Let's bring up the headline here from the Herald. Illegal immigrant, child rapist, prostitute arrested in Lynn now faces deportation for the second time. For the second time, we'll scroll down here and take a look. Here he is here. Yeah, thank you. Let's see. What's his name? Lynn Man. Uh, Raulman Lopez Norasco. Do we have that name right? I don't know if we have. Has been arrested again by ICE in Lynn. He faces deportation to Mexico. He also owns a Guatemalan passport. He was previously arrested in 2015, convicted of sexual conduct for a fee. So he was a prostitute in 2015, according to immigration officials. So he spotted back in Lynn and arrested on January 25th. In 2006, he was sent back to Mexico on an unknown date at an unknown location. He came back into the United States. Wasn't that nice? I wonder how he snuck back into the United States undetected. Could it have been through our open border? Maybe it was. So here's the tweet. For whatever reason, I don't understand why they blur out his face, but they blur out his face. Thank you, Harold, for actually showing him. Thank you very much, Harold, for doing that. But here he is, previously deported Mexican citizen, convicted of child rape, arrested by ERO Boston. ERO Boston remains committed to fighting and removing predators such as this from our New England neighborhoods. Our officers were able to locate and arrest this individual who has already proven to be a threat to children. So again, understand what your Democrat lawmakers want. They want more of these people in your cities and towns. That is their policy, right? That's their policy, clear as day. Stop me if you think you've heard this one before, maybe even just last month. Yeah, sure you did. Illegal immigrant with notice to appear, charged with rape, released by Sanctuary City. This was just late last month, right? Here we are with Judicial Watch. A recent case out of Massachusetts illustrates how the Biden administration's negligent open border policies and local sanctuary laws mingle to endanger the American public. It involves a Haitian national who entered the United States illegal at the end of 2022 through the port of Brownsville. We don't even know how this guy got back into the United States. He didn't check in. Like, he didn't swim over the Rio Grande and then check in. He didn't bother to check in. He just snuck back in. So basically what you have here is a situation of these sexual predators coming up from usually South America. I hope that doesn't follow me. Usually South America. It's fallen before. And predating, that's not a word, Jack. Predating, we're going to use it today. Predating on us and our children, and then sometimes getting sent back, and of course sometimes not. And even when they get sent back, they come back like bad pennies because we have an open border. We have an open border. As I told you, when I went to Shelby Park in Eagle Pass in August of 2022, I was right down there at the boat ramp, the place where the Texas National Guard is now occupying with the barbed wire and the shipping containers. I was right there. I was like, just went down there on a Sunday morning, and here comes. I was like, I want to fact check Bill Maloogian to see if what I'm seeing on the TV is actually true, and it is true. Like, I literally went there to kind of say, is this all true or is it a lot of hype? Nope, it's absolutely true. And now we have a potential border deal. It's not a border deal, but that's what they're calling it in Washington, D.C. And, of course, Maura Healey is backing it. Mike Johnson, the so-called Speaker of the U.S. House, said it's dead on arrival. And this bill is facing some backlash also on the left. Migrant group calls it inhumane. $118 billion deal, which is not even like real money, because we're running at least $1 billion per fiscal year just in Massachusetts to deal with the migrant problem here in Massachusetts. Just a bill, easily $1 billion just in Massachusetts. Of course, most of that is self-inflicted because we have the only right to shelter law in the country. New York City has a right to shelter consent decree, which they cannot change. It's part of a court order. Massachusetts has the only law. Remember that we have a right to shelter law, which we could change and or amend or tweak at any time if we wanted to, but the legislature and Governor Healy does not want to. And that acts as a giant, illegal alien electromagnet. That's why we're having so many because we have this law. If we restricted it to people who are actually, I don't know, citizens, then we wouldn't have as much of a problem. But the reason why Massachusetts is kind of ground zero is because of that law, which we could totally get rid of at any time. Let's bring back up this Herald article about the deal. Deal would also give aid to Ukraine and Israel because, of course, securing our border has to be tied to the forever. You know where I'm going with that, especially that Ukraine thing. I agree with Speaker Johnson, by the way, that there should be additional aid to Israel, just to be perfectly clear on that. Yeah, that is going to annoy a lot of people. But here's the thing that we highlight here. And this is why the left is upset. The Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition is slamming the legislation, saying the border deal would lead to harmful backward policies, such as streamlining deportations and shutting down the border. Shutting down the border is a backward policy. It's inhumane and un-American, says Elizabeth Sweet, Myra's executive director. Understand what they're saying. Having a border for your country is un-American. She says it right here. I almost fell off my chair when I read this morning. Rather than prioritizing humane immigration reform, the Senate and President want to gut it by making it easier to shut the border. Yes, so they're admitting that the border is open to individuals and families fleeing political violence. They're admitting the border is open. Every one of those people that I saw that came up the boat ramp at Shelby Park in Eagle Pass when I was there in August, they weren't there for political persecution. They were there for a job. They were going to work to compete against you. That's what this is all about. It's how to get workers into the United States that are going to compete against you for housing, for jobs, for healthcare, you name it. You're going to pay for them, and then they're going to compete against you. Understand how this works, right? And in fact, one of the major provisions of this Senate bill, which might not even make it out of the Senate, is actually to fast track the work permit process, Let's cut to Politico in their morning report. So in their morning report, here, where is it here? Couldn't have gone far. Here we are here. The interesting thing, the way Markey and Senator Warren are playing it, is that they're not saying that they're going to vote for or against it. They're bashing Mike Johnson, the so-called Speaker of the House in U.S. Capitol. They're bashing him for saying that the deal is dead, but they're not saying whether they're going to vote for the deal or not, because there are a number of significant group of people on the left-hand side of the aisle who are also against the bill. So they're just using this as a political foil. Let's bash Mike Johnson. Let's deflect, but let's not actually say whether we're for or against the bill itself. Jake Auchincloss, is that however you pronounce his name? He is a yes on the bipartisan border deal before Congress, which includes billions of dollars for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. So yeah, that's not a big surprise, but he definitely seems to be like, is he angling for a higher office? Or I think he's playing a longer game, right? And of course, Governor Healy wants it because if we get a bill in Congress that she's using this whole Congress in their inability to act, she's using that as a say, it's not our fault in Massachusetts. If Congress would just give us more money. She's using that to deflect from the responsibility of herself and not changing the emergency housing right to shelter law that we have here in Massachusetts. She say, well, it's Congress's fault. No, it's your fault, Maura. Okay, so take some responsibility. Moving on. So we had a teacher strike in Newton. And what we learned here in Massachusetts is that effectively, even though there's a bill to make teacher strikes legal, teacher strikes are effectively already legal. And now we have some fallout from a teacher strike in Andover. Not only there's a financial cost, but there's actually an education cost to these, because the teachers run around and say that, oh, it's for the children. We're going to have better quality education. Oh, really? Take it away, Lisa Hughes.
Teacher strikes. One just ended in Newton with significant raises for the teachers. But another district in which teachers went on strike is now facing some tough choices. As WBZ's Christina Rex tells us, that district may need to cut teachers to fund the contract.
They're going to cut teachers to fund the contract. Huh.
Teachers closed in on a deal. The school committee chair warned about the risks of expensive teachers' contracts in other towns.
Right, because there's only so many dollars to go around, which we're going to talk about in a minute.
They proposed to lay off 4% of their staff to fund a contract they couldn't afford.
That district, Andover.
Have not been looking forward to this meeting.
The school committee is considering cutting up to 36 full-time school jobs to make up a $2.7 million budget gap. Andover teachers.
Fair contract. We're going to cost 36 of our own fellow workers their jobs, but we're going to get a fair contract.
Held a 5-day strike back in November, and the school committee chair warned that the pricey new contract could mean cuts to programs and jobs.
It's potentially any job in the district. No final decisions have been made yet. We are here, whether we like it or not. None of us like it.
And you know what's going to happen in Newton. Down the road, there's going to be some cuts, whether it's in your public safety or in the school department or the cemetery department. Somebody's going to pay. Somebody's going to pay for that strike because there's only so much money.
But it's simple math. And there is no way to balance a budget deficit of $2.7 million without reducing headcount.
But some parents say they'd be willing to pay more in taxes to guarantee great schools.
And it's hard when you live in a town where you don't think that this is going to happen. That's why you moved to Andover, right?
Because that's great schools.
Yes.
At the end of the day, the money is there.
Andover Education Association VP Julian DeGloria wishes the school committee would push for a bigger budget to fund programs that could make this town competitive.
It comes down to will on the part of the school committee to actually advocate at town meeting or to put pressure back on the town manager and basically say, look, the schools in this town are one of the reasons that people move here.
Andover teachers tell me they plan to rally outside of their respective schools every day this week to draw attention to the proposed cuts. There's another school.
So they strike in order to get these giant raises. What was it, 15.5% in Andover? Fact check me if I'm wrong. They strike to get these giant raises, and then a couple of months later, because that was in November, a couple of months later, when the consequences hit, then they protest those consequences because their whole premise of the whole premise of the strike was to make things better for kids, but it's not going to be better for kids if there's less teachers in the classroom. Will there be? So Channel 5 brings up the question, are teacher strikes the new normal in Massachusetts? State union leader weighs in. No, we're not going to play this video because we know that teacher strikes are the new normal in Massachusetts. And we have, once we have this Newton thing on tap here, we have and we had the Dedham strike back in 2019 before the pandemic. We've had any number of other teacher strikes, remember, which are supposed to be illegal. Brookline, Malden, Haverhill, Woburn, Andover, and now Newton. The union official says no, teacher strikes will not be the norm in Massachusetts. It might not be the norm, but it will be tolerated. It's effectively legal. The Newton Teachers Association got fined $900,000. I know, that eventually that's going to be pushed off and off and off, and eventually will be either dismissed entirely or settled for absolutely pennies on the dollar. They're never going to pay the $900,000 fine. Everyone knows it, right? Everyone knows it. That's a joke made for a good headline, but not really true, is it? So as we move forward, both on the municipal level and the state level, because we're losing so many of the people in Massachusetts that provide value, we are running up against a significant problem. And that is our tax revenues are faltering. And yeah, stop me if you've also heard this one before. And what's happening here is just recently, Governor Healy had moved the goalpost because our revenue was not hitting projections. So she lowered the revenue forecast by like about $1 billion. And since moving the goalpost a little bit lower, we still missed that goalpost by 7% in January. So tax numbers for January are in, and it's not good. The only thing that kept tax numbers up to where, that was an absolute positive disaster was the sales tax revenue. Sales tax revenue was up 3.1%. But when you stop and think about that, up 3.1%, inflation is running about 3%. And therefore, as inflation runs about 3%, so should your sales tax revenue should also run at about the same pace as inflation. So that's what happened. And so in our sales tax, we're just keeping pace with inflation. If you want to see the consumer spending in Massachusetts grow, then you want to see sales tax revenue come in at a rate that's higher than the pace of inflation. But sales tax revenue came in at the pace of inflation. How can it go? How low can it go, the Herald asks. Mass misses revenue projections again. Make it 7 months. 7 months in a row, we've missed projections, even after now, most recently, we moved the goalpost to make it easier. We still missed it by 7%, which is better coverage, actually, in Commonwealth Beacon. Here it is here. Tax revenues kept sliding in January, come in nearly 7% below recently lowered forecast. Bruce Moll. Tax revenues continued to slide in January as collections came in nearly 7% below a target that was revised down just last month. Slipping tax collections, more headaches for Maura Healy. We're basically $265 million. You should just want to kind of round it off. That's a kind of an easier number that we were down in January, $265 million. Now, you might remember that just recently the governor imposed $375 million of cuts, including cuts for local fire departments because they're not nearly as important as illegal immigrants, right? So let's go to Evan Horowitz over at Tufts. While the evidence is far from definitive, the latest tax report feeds my concern that weakness might be spreading from tax returns to the economy more broadly. Up until now, the clearest sign has been this weak sales tax receipt, suggesting something off with consumer activity. But this month, we also have weak income withholding, which means falling paychecks. So if you look at these job numbers, there's a lot been made about the jobs report that came out on Friday. What do we have? A huge beat on the number, like 335,000 new jobs. But when you dive into that, what's happening here in the United States writ large, not just Massachusetts, what's happening here are two things. The new jobs that are being created are part-time jobs. Very few full-time jobs are being created. Very, very few. Almost all the growth is in part-time jobs. So people are transitioning from regular full-time jobs where you're working at a factory or you're a nurse or whatever it is happens to be, and you're now getting a DoorDash job and another part-time job. You're cobbling things together with different income sources and not working as much. Now, the jobs might be created, but these are not good jobs at good wages, to quote Mike Dukakis. I can't believe I just did that. But they're like a DoorDash economy is one of my favorite economist says. It's Bidenomics is a DoorDash economy. And as a result, our tax withholding numbers are down. Let's bring back the article again. Doug Howgate, president of Taxpayers Association or Foundation, said he didn't want to read too much into a single month. It's been 7 months in a row, Doug. But he acknowledged the situation is fluid. Oh, okay. There continues to be downside risk for fiscal 2024. You think so? It says that we thought, hold on. It says what we thought was a bright spot, the new surtax on ink, may not be as big. Oh, a little bit of truth here. Oh, my God. Someone's going to call him and tell him that you can't say this. Right? Someone's going to spank his butt. It says that we thought what was a bright spot, the millionaire's tax, may not be as big a bright spot. Oh, isn't that interesting, Doug? Let's go on to Mask Fiscal and their point of view. I want to scroll down here. Governor Healy needs to abandon her proposal to allow municipalities to raise taxes on food, lodging, and vehicles any further. So what she wants to do effectively is cut local aid to balance the budget, and then to make up for the cuts in local aid, allow your local city and town to raise local taxes. That's the strategy. Because local aid's a big ticket number. The governor needs to reverse course on her proposal to raise the stamp tax on certain real estate transactions. Governor needs to shake off her impulse to raise taxes on out of control, and to fund out of control state spending, and to start slashing taxes and wasteful spending. Right? Right. What we are in is a spending crisis. The government is still spending, as is the national government, still spending like it's the middle of a pandemic or even worse, right? Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what's happening. If Governor Healy wants to reverse this course, she needs to rein in spending and consider broad-based tax cuts. Until then, the income tax surcharge will continue to drive taxpayers elsewhere, and state revenues will continue to decline. So we're starting a spiral. We're starting a spiral of decline relative to our state tax revenue, and that's going to affect all sorts of municipalities across the state. Newton just did what was a 12% annual raises for the teachers. They're going to have a really difficult time. See, Newton, a great article the other day by Greg Reibman, is that how you pronounce his name, in Commonwealth Beacon, basically saying Newton's baked its own cake, because time after time they reject development, especially commercial development, and commercial development is where you generate your tax revenue for a municipality. And eventually there's just not going to be enough money, which is what those school committee members were saying up in North Andover, up in Andover. All right, so moving on, more insanity. Safe injection sites. Notice how they stopped saying that, because there is no such thing as a safe injection site. They're now using the language overdose prevention center. Understand that an overdose prevention center does not actually stop you from overdosing. It just says that somebody is there to help you if and when you overdose. I don't even want to say if. When you overdose. It's an overdose center is basically what I think that's what we should call it. First state-sanctioned overdose center. Could Massachusetts be next? You see, what they want to do is make heroin legal. What they want to do is make heroin legal. And yeah, so Rhode Island is, I don't know what they're thinking, but they're basically going to make this legal. The country's first state-regulated overdose center where people can obtain pre-obtained drugs can use pre-obtained drugs under the supervision of health and recovery officials. Will be opening in Rhode Island. So let me just ask you a question. So they have this overdose center, and the people go in there with their pre-obtained drugs. Where do you think they're going to get these drugs? If I'm a drug dealer, I'm going to set up shop right outside the overdose center. That's where I'm going to set up, right? Because I'm going to have a steady stream of customers. You imagine, oh, I got to get over to the overdose center. Where do I get some drugs? Oh, there's a guy right out front. Perfect. Right? Or around the corner. Maybe they won't be right out front. Maybe they won't be that obvious. 20,000 square foot space will be at 45 Willard Avenue. Oh, near the hospital. Perfect. It's got to be right there. Right. So we can rush you right over the house. There, the drugs will be tested for fentanyl and other substances, and professionals will be on hand to prevent and reverse overdoses. Advocacy Renew and Project Weber said the controversial Senate, made possible by a 2021 law in Rhode Island, are illegal on the federal level. Is Rhode Island part of the United States? I thought they were part of the United States, weren't they? How can they do this if it's illegal? Yeah. Dem governors. Meanwhile, in Maine, Sheriff, thousands of marijuana plants are seized from Maine home owned by a Massachusetts resident. Now, they didn't release the name of the Massachusetts resident, but I want to direct you to this fantastic article from the Maine Wire. Here it is here. Triad Weed, How Chinese Marijuana Took Over Rural Maine by Steve Robinson from November of 2023. And basically, he says the illegal Chinese marijuana grows have taken over much of rural Maine. The government is either incapable or unwilling to do anything about it. Fantastic article by the Maine Wire. I strongly recommend it. And basically, what he's saying is, in that November article, is what's covered in this story out of Maine yesterday. This house in Maine, we'll just kind of flip through these pictures here, it was a major grow site for marijuana. And in Steve Robinson's article, they talk about how these places are fairly easy to identify. Number one, they reek of marijuana. Like from the curb, you can smell it really strong. Second, they almost always have upgraded electrical service or significant electrical service to the building. Third, almost always they have the windows and blinds either drawn or taped over or papered over or whatever, because you don't want natural sunlight in there because that somehow screws with the plants in terms of their optimal growth. I'm horrific at plants, so I don't think I'd be able to describe that to you. So here's the house. In Maine, 2509 Auburn Road in Turner, Maine. You can see there's the electrical power, ample electrical power. They have these yellow cables going on the exterior. There's another one on the back there. You can see that there. And they got some signs. All the windows are all papered over, or there's blinds so no one can see. It's right across the street from this cute little gas station here in rural Maine, the Beer Pond Variety and Diner. I'm sure they loved having the pot house right now. I'm sure they could smell it. So no word yet on the name of the Massachusetts resident who owns this home at 2509 Auburn Road in Turner, Maine. After a passerby reported a possible structural fire and smoke coming out of the eaves of the garage, according to the Androscoggin County Sheriff's Office, or however you pronounce that. Upon entering the home, a deputy and firefighters determined that the smoke and steam was being generated from a large quantity of marijuana plants growing inside the residence, the officer said. Investigators estimated 500 marijuana plants, but a thorough search of the home reportedly 2,500 plants. Grow lights, chemical fertilizers, dehumidifiers, propane heaters were also discovered. No license, no record of a license. Investigators are working to determine if the operation is connected with recent searches in Lincoln, Kennebec, and Somerset counties. So this is just a normal day in Maine. Where they have giant grow houses. See, you buy a rural house, it's all run down, you get upgraded electricity, you board up all the windows or somehow block them off, and you start growing massive amounts of weed. And this is almost always done by Chinese nationals and or Chinese Americans in Maine. Yeah, go read that article. Unbelievable article. once again in the main wire how Chinese marijuana grows took over rural Maine. Can't recommend it enough. And that's a headline just from yesterday. All right. So apparently, meth is now back in Massachusetts, and they're sneaking it into Adderall pills. Let's listen to Channel 5.
Recently, the DEA says they're seeing a surge in meth beyond Mass and Cass and into communities throughout Massachusetts. And now it's pressed and hidden in fake Adderall pills.
So they're putting meth, or they're disguising meth as fake Adderall pills.
Why Adderall pills for meth?
I just think it was an easy market. They knew that, especially with like young kids.
That guy's from the DEA, in case you didn't see his title.
College-age kids. They knew we had a pill market up here.
We found the fake prescription pills showing up in drug busts around Massachusetts, made to look just like Adderall but containing meth, including one of the largest single seizures of meth and fentanyl in the history of the state. Special agent in charge of the DEA's Boston office, Brian Boyle, is urging parents to warn their kids.
If you're not getting the drug from a doctor and going into a pharmacy, please don't use that drug.
Yeah, if your kid's saying, "Oh, I'm just taking my Adderall," and you're like, "No, we don't have any more." Where'd you get that Adderall? It's not Adderall. It's probably meth. And now here's Channel 5 interviewing somebody that has survived Mass and Cass from taking all sorts of drugs, including meth.
Scary.
Michaela wants everyone to know just how addictive and destructive meth is. She's been sober for nearly 5 years after being involuntarily committed because of her addiction. It took her months to stop hallucinating.
So I'd still wake up in the middle of the night and think people were climbing up my windows. One-on-one therapy.
Michaela now works at Perennial Recovery in Westboro, helping others. And also comes back here to do outreach to women whose struggles she knows all too well.
It's probably like the greatest part of working in recovery is getting to see people come in and change and feel worthy again.
All right, so what we're seeing here, let's just remember why we're talking about this. We're talking about this because in Rhode Island, where's that article? Here it is here. In Rhode Island, they want to legalize heroin. And effectively here in Massachusetts, at the corner of Mass and Cass, we legalized heroin. The mayors, Wu and Walsh, legalized heroin at the corner of Mass and Cass. That's why we had the problem, right, at Mass and Cass. By the way, I was over at Mass and Cass about 2 or 3 weeks ago. All of the fencing is still there, blocking off the sidewalks and everything. All of the crowd control fencing still up, as if they're expecting everyone to come back to the Mass and Cass when the weather gets warmer, right? Yeah, they're just keeping it there because they know that's how do I want to say? It just got to come back, right? They're going to lose their will, and the weather's going to get warmer about 2 or 3 months from now. Thank God. God, I hate winter. And they're going to have that same problem again. We know it for sure. The New York Times is telling us that you're a climate criminal if you create too much greenhouse gas. And they've now mapped your climate. And they want to make sure that you understand, you climate criminals that create too much. They want to make sure that you understand how you're contributing. And of course, it is the wealthy communities that are creating too much climate contribution, I guess is the phrase. I don't even know. I don't think I understand the language here. But here's the map of Metro Boston. Here we go here. And basically what they're showing here is the communities in green have a smaller climate footprint than the communities in the darker red colors. And what they would like to do, this is crystal clear by this map, is they'd like to make communities, let's just say this census tract here, in Dorchester, I think that is. They want to make the quality of life in, let's just say, this section of Newton and Wellesley over here, where it's much higher than normal. They want to make that community like Dorchester. In other words, they want everyone to be equal in their emissions output. The only thing is that when you do that, you're going to make everyone equally miserable, right? Nobody wants to live in if you're living in, what is this over here? Probably Lincoln or something, Weston or something like that. Do you want to have lower quality of life? Because that's basically everything about living in Weston or Lincoln. It's really nice there, isn't it? And one of the reasons why it's really nice is because you have the ability to spend money on energy, right? And this map shows that you should really be spending less money on energy, you climate criminal, you. And the fact that you're doing that is obviously ruining our planet, and you need to live a quality of life that's more associated with the areas that you see in green on this map. And the fact that you're not doing that shows that you're not thinking globally and acting locally. You climate criminal, you, how dare you? Yeah, so can't make this up. Let's go on to the fact that somehow our hospitals are experiencing a capacity crunch. Now, Obama told me I could keep my doctor, which apparently wasn't true. Yeah, somehow that's not true. And apparently, even though we're not in the middle of a pandemic, our hospitals are
crunch, causing backlogs at hospitals across a big part of the state. Hospitals in the Boston area and northeastern Massachusetts now considered high risk, meaning they may have to cut back on elective procedures.
There are capacity concerns that are affecting hospitals. And so usually that means that our hospitals are full.
The Massachusetts.
Oh, how could that be? Could it be that the entire government involvement in our healthcare is now a complete cluster? Could it be that? I think that's what he's saying, that there's just way too much government regulation. So what you're going to have here, unfortunately, is you're going to have a massive amount of Democrats come in and say, the system's not working. Those private hospitals, Steward Health, and the profitable people, they're going to come in and say, we need more regulation, because that's how they view everything, more government control, where obviously the answer is less government control. This is a perfect cycle. You have politicians that come in and they put in some type of legislation to fix things. And then when that doesn't work, then the next generation of politicians come in and say, the marketplace is not working. The evil corporations are making too much money, and the system is failing. We need more regulation. That's the cycle, right? It is totally the cycle, because in order to advance yourself as a politician, you have to be shown to be doing something. And doing something almost always means making government bigger to show that you did something. And when you do that, you make the private sector smaller. And when you make the private sector smaller, you reduce choice and reduce capacity, which is exactly what we're seeing with the hospital crisis. We can point to 1,000 different topics that lead us to the exact same conclusion. All right, I'm Jack Gately. You can call me Jack or John. It's been great to be with you on this Tuesday, February 6th. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.